to the Happy Lawyer Project. I'm your host, Akoma Moronu, and I created this show to help lawyers find happiness in life with a law degree. Together with my guests, we provide the knowledge, skills, insight, and inspiration you'll need to find your happy. Hey there, lawyers. I am super excited to be back behind the mic with an interview that's going to be super inspirational and so practical. But before we get to that, I have a few housekeeping matters I want to attend to. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you who came out to the Miss JD conference in Philly. I love that you came to say hi, and it was a wonderful opportunity to introduce some of you to this amazing organization that I care so much about. With that in mind, I also want to give you guys a reminder that I will be in DC at the end of April for GalCon. That's the Girl Attorney Leadership Conference. So if you'll be in DC at the conference, please reach out to me on Instagram or email me. Let me know. I'd love to meet you. If you haven't bought tickets, I believe tickets are on sale till April 5th. So you can head on over to the girlattorneyleadershipconference.com and find tickets there. I also want to give a big shout out to Mia555. She recently left me a review on Apple Podcasts that was so incredibly sweet that I wanted to give her a shout out and share that review with you guys here. Mia said, "This podcast has changed my life. As an example, inspired by this podcast, my husband and I have delved into the personal finance world and are finally strategizing for our future. There are so many other examples though. I work in government and have taken something valuable away from every episode, even the ones that were geared towards big law. All lawyers should listen to this podcast." Oh my God, Mia. I love that review. You have no idea how much it means to me. As you guys know, this podcast is truly a labor of love, and I put so much time and energy after work, after my kids go to bed, to really put together quality content for you. So when I get messages like that, it really makes it feel like it's all worth it. And so if you're getting value from this podcast and want to send a little thank you my way, the best way to do that is to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's super easy to do, and it makes such an impact for me to be able to get good guests on the show, grow the show, and help others find the show. Speaking of which, let's move on to the show. So today, I am bringing you an interview with Rachel Gezerseh. She's an adjunct professor and a partner at a boutique litigation firm in LA, and she's now also an author. Rachel recently published her first book, The Law Career Playbook, the Guerrilla Guide to Getting a Legal Job You Actually Like. And on today's show, we dive into the details of what she's learned about what it really takes to get control of your career and find that dream job. But let's be honest, at the very least, you'll be able to find a job that you can tolerate that is moving you towards that dream life. And there's just so many practical tips in this little interview that I think is going to give you so much value. So I really hope you guys enjoy. Welcome to the Happy Lawyer Project. I am super excited to introduce you to today's guest. Welcome, Rachel Gezerseh, to the show. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi.
So, Rachel, I've been waiting to have you on the show. It's been kind of almost years in the making. But yeah. I'd love, for people who don't know who you are, could you just start with a brief description of who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. So I am an attorney here in Los Angeles. I do business litigation, and I am also an educator. I teach at USC, and I'm a new author. I just wrote a book.
That is very, very exciting. And part of the reason we have you on, but also because we want to learn, your story is such a good one that I want to talk about that. So let's start there. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, as far as my journey to being an attorney, a litigator, I went to Southwestern Law School here in Los Angeles, and I worked then after law school at a big law firm at Jones Day for just over 10 years. And then almost 2 years ago, I joined two of my colleagues from Jones Day. We call our firm, which is Liang Lai LLP, we actually call it Jones Day Jr. because we're all former Jones Day attorneys. I joined them. And I'm living the dream now. I was working on really fun cases, but being my own boss.
And what inspired you to write the book?
Well, yeah, the book actually is a long journey. It started when I was still at Jones Day. I was about a 7th or 8th year associate, and I was really not the happiest of campers. Not so much, it wasn't the firm's fault. I loved the firm and still actually work with the firm today. But my own sort of satisfaction in the job had just waned. And, it was a double cycle of pain because I felt like, well, I should be grateful because I have this great job. And yet I hate my job and I'm not happy. And my way of dealing with that was I'd always, for all the years since I'd gotten the job out of Southwestern, people would always ask me, how did you do it? How were you able to land a job at this great firm, coming from an unranked law school? I started thinking about that journey and I decided to start a blog and try to reverse engineer my experience and how I got that job initially. And, I thought maybe I'd be happier at the job if I could bring more people, because I was actually at Jones Day the only Southwestern graduate at this multi-thousand lawyer firm. I thought, well, if I put the word out, maybe I can bring in other people like me and that'll make me happier. That was really my initial push to start the blog, which was is called Break Into Big Law. And I put the word out. I started writing articles and, describing my experience. And strangely, the blog blew up. It wasn't that all these people wanted to get into big law. I found that students all over the country actually were really interested in ways that they could get a job, any job, but really jobs that fit them well and that they liked. And so I started speaking. And then from that, I started teaching. And then from that, I started getting all these student feedback saying, Rachel, I wish you could be with me 24/7 and tell me what to do. And obviously I can't do that, but I started thinking, well, wouldn't it be great if I could put it all down in writing, like a step-by-step guide of what you could do to hustle and get that job that you actually like? And so that's where the book came from. It was years in the making, but now I can put it out there and, people have been using it. Students have been using it now for about 6 months and with great success. People are really doing well with it.
I want to go further into the book. Before we go there, I want to touch on the thing you said about not being happy, like satisfied in your work and turning to the blog. Did you find that the blog did bring you that fulfillment?
Absolutely. And that was, it was really surprising to me. I had become kind of a brat sort of in my big law tower. I actually had great experience at Jones Day and got to do a lot of great things, but I had sort of lost touch with the meaning of that, right? And so when I started mentoring students and speaking about my experience, and I would tell them, oh, this is what I'm working on, and their eyes would light up, and I could remember suddenly why I got into this whole thing in the first place. And through mentoring and working with people and seeing their excitement and their passion for going into it, it actually reignited my passion and made me a happier lawyer. So by the time, I think it was my 10th year, right before I left, I was actually a really happy lawyer, even in big law, working on the cases because I was reinvigorated based on just working with these younger attorneys. It was really interesting for me. And it just changed my whole view of my career and myself.
I really wanted to highlight that because I suspected it was going to be something along those lines because I had a similar experience with the podcast. It's not like, obviously, I don't just love talking, hearing myself talk. Who loves to hear themselves talk on their recorded voice? But it is getting the opportunity to share stories and to be in touch with the community and to give back to others in the industry and to have these types of conversations that force you to focus on your own fulfillment and why you do it.
Right. Yeah, it changed everything for me. It made me a happy lawyer. I mean, there was a period of time in there where I was thinking about leaving the law. And I, after doing this work and teaching and just the writing and just the response and, just people telling me, no, what you're doing is great. It just made me, it reinvigorated my love for the law, which is why I'm still doing this now.
And how did the teaching come about?
Yeah. So, the teaching was interesting. So I started being asked to go all over the country and speak, so I would speak to pre-law groups, to college groups. I would speak to law school, career services departments would sponsor my talks. Actually, what happened was my school, Southwestern, a couple of years back got ranked number 1 for unemployment in the nation. And that was very disconcerting for me being an alum of my school. And I love my school. I had a great experience there. And I didn't understand the disconnect. How could that be, right? How could this great school in Los Angeles with all these alumni connections be ranked number 1 for unemployment? So I actually called up the dean of career services and I pitched the idea from my talks and from my blog and just everything I'd been doing with the mentorship. Why don't I build out a class for you? And, teach your recent grads, like your unemployed people who are graduating, passing the bar, and then being unemployed with this huge debt load. Why don't we start a class for them? And that's what we did. And that was I think it was in 2016 was the first one. It was 8 sessions. The school supported it fully. The students were amazing. It was about 30 students. And about 6 months after that class, we had 100% employment for those unemployed graduates. So it was an amazing experience and very successful.
Okay, so that's amazing. And I think that result speaks for itself. But Why? Like, why? What are law schools not doing? And what does your book, kind of, what is the gap your book fills?
Right. So, it's actually, that's a really, really good question. And it's actually why I love to actually speak to the pre-law crowd as well, because they actually have more time to do this. So what law school isn't teaching and what students really just don't have time for or the bandwidth for is this idea of building out your network before you need it. Right. And that's what my class teaches. That's what my book teaches. It teaches, it teaches students, look, use the tools that are available to you, career services, resume consultations, things like that. But that you cannot rely on these things. You cannot rely on your school to get you a job. You cannot rely on Simplicity to get you a job or LinkedIn to get you a job. You actually have to build a personal network of advocates, of people who know you, who know your quality, who understand who you are and what you want, who are behind the scenes working to get you a job, right? So that by the time you need a job, you have all of these people out there referring you, telling you what's available and helping, grooming you, giving you insider information to help you get those jobs. And that's what my class teaches. It teaches, the core tenet of my class is the informational interview and how important that is to be going on those, to be researching, targeting professionals, meeting them, building connections, and having this vast network of people built through the informational interview. So it's very different than this idea, this rush to the resume and just sending in your application and just hoping that you get a job. The idea that I teach is that, you build it yourself. You take charge of your own career. You are CEO of yourself. And through this long-term process, you build this out and it really will help you get jobs that aren't necessarily even posted.
I didn't get that advice and have seen that proven to be true over and over again in my career. And I now am being asked to go on informational interviews with people. People don't necessarily know what they're doing.
Right. That's right. That's right. And so I teach how to prepare. I mean, to me, these informational interviews are so key, but yet there's so much work that has to be done before you even reach out to try to get the informational interview, right? You have to learn how to harness the power of LinkedIn. You have to learn how to harness the power of the internet, right? And do research and pull together a dossier on the people that you want to target and meet. And then you have to prepare properly for these informational interviews and treat yourself properly when you go into them. You can't treat them like a job interview. It's a very, very different process. And that's what my book teaches and that's what my class teaches. And my students who have gone through that process have that 100% success rate because they know how to work it.
So I think we should take one step back because often when I am asked to meet people and, for them to quote unquote pick my brain, the thing I find is that they don't have a clear sense about what they want to do.
That's right.
And what they're looking for. And, it's just so open-ended, the kinds of questions they're asking me. And it kind of feels like a fishing expedition. And like, I'm supposed to convince them, which I'm like, I don't really have time for this, to be honest. So I'd like to start first with kind of, do you give people advice on how to figure that initial thing, how to know if a role is good for you, how to identify what your skill sets are, how to be thinking about potential opportunities?
Right. Yes, absolutely. And that's a huge part of it. And, I have in my book and in my class, I've developed these worksheets, and really it is a self-explorative process, right? You need to, the problem is that most law students, a lot of law students and college students, they don't know. And part of that not knowing is because they're not plugged into the profession in the first place. Maybe they've, worked as an intern in a civil law office and they've seen that side of it, but they have no idea what it's like to work for the government or work in an entertainment law office or go work in an employment law office or whatever it is, right? So they just don't know. They don't know the vast world of opportunities out there, which is another reason why the informational interview becomes so important. What I say, and I call this iteration method, right? I sort of stole it from Silicon Valley and this idea that, we as people are products, right? And that you may not know what you want and you may have some idea, right? So why don't you iterate it? Why don't you test it? Why don't you pick something, pick a person, pick a place where that person works, go meet with that person, act as a sponge, soak up the information, try to see if you could see yourself doing what they do. And if you do, great, then get 10 other people that person knows and go meet with them. If you meet with that person and it's what they do sounds just terribly boring and awful, and you could never see yourself doing that on a 9 to 5 or 9 to 8 basis, then, you go back to the drawing board and you iterate again, right? And that's the process. And I have all kinds of worksheets in the book and all kinds of things that I've developed to help people hone in on what are those things that are driving you? What is it that gets you up in the morning and makes you happy and excited to do something for the rest of your life? 9 to 5, 9 to 8, right?
Oh, completely. And you have to actually be willing to like listen and reflect. I think sometimes people think that it's a one and done. And so I love that idea of iterations, because even you could have one interview today and the one tomorrow could be completely different based on what you learned today. Likewise, you could do this at the beginning of your career and need to do it again 3 years into your career because you are evolving professionally.
Right. And you have to keep doing it. I mean, I still do this now. It's a huge part of my practice in business development. And even when I was writing the book and doing research and figuring out things about branding and marketing, I went and did informational interviews with top partners at firms, at scary firms that, that I'm scared of. I actually set up interviews with people that kind of freak me out in real life, but I had to do it because I'm telling people to do it, right? And you do this all the time. You need to be good at it. And it needs to be a daily practice. It needs to be something that you're doing all the time. It doesn't just stop when you get your first job.
And do you have a method or advice on how you ask somebody for that interview?
Oh, yeah. So there's all kinds of, I actually provide in my class and in the book scripts, because a lot of times students, they get freaked out the first few times that they do this about, what should I say? And will people respond? And, what I've seen from students is they want to send this very, very long, convoluted email that's basically their resume regurgitated. And that's not what you want to do. Because as you and I know, we don't have time to read that. And if we see that email, we're just going to delete it most likely, or just ignore it, right? But if a student really thinks it through and sends a 2 to 3 or 4 sentence reach out email that hits the hot points of connection, as I call them, if you're an alumni, you want to highlight that. If they are someone who are, they're in a field that you've got experience in, you want to highlight that. Whatever warm connections you can highlight in those 3 sentences to pique their interest and make them respond, you'll want to do that. So I have templates that help, that actually are proven, that my students have used over and over again, that have worked to get people to respond back to them.
And how high up should people be reaching? Are these roles that you would want to have now, or are these like, I may want to be a GC one day, so let's see what they did to get there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's good to do a range of things. I think it's good to talk to, if you're interested in big law, for example, you'll want to talk to associates, you'll want to talk to partners, you'll want to talk to U.S. attorneys who used to work in big law. You'll want to talk to judges if you can get them. There's some judges who actually will meet with you and do an informational interview. There's a lot who actually went to Southwestern who I've talked to recently who said, yeah, I love what you're doing. I would definitely meet with your students, So yeah, I think you should reach, if people interest you, I think you should go for it, because what do you have to lose? There's no downside. The worst thing that can happen is they just ignore your email. It's not a thing.
I've ignored to be fair, I've ignored a lot of emails that were, to your point, super long, mostly because I just felt like I needed to respond to all of it.
Right.
And that I just never get back to it.
Right. Well, and in my book, I actually have a few samples of that, of just what not to do, right? And the sort of the traps that students fall into where they feel they have to show too much. You really don't. What you need to do is you need to do your research. You need to have a good sense of not what you want. You're not locking yourself into your career for your whole life, right? But a good sense of what you're trying out, what you're iterating towards at this point. Just put that in there and throw it out there. And for me, what I tell students is it's a volume game. You really want to send these out every week. You want to send many of them out. You want to expect that your rate of return will not be too high. And so that's why you got to keep building your pipeline.
This reminds me a lot of when I started the podcast and I would just have to send out all of these
Oh, I know.
emails out, just be like, hi, this is why I think you might be a good fit. And it is a numbers game, but it gets easier,
It does. It really gets easier. And all of my students have told me that. And it's a domino effect. You never know. If you start putting yourself out there, if you start doing this work, serendipity is just going to kick in, and just the most random, awesome things will start happening. Someone may not respond to you directly, but another person, an even more powerful hiring partner, will respond to you saying that someone else forwarded their email to them. Just weird and great things happen when you start doing the work. And all of my students have come back and told me that. So that's it. It's just a matter of getting over those hurdles. And I have exercises for that too in the book, because a lot of times this is a mental game. You have just these mental scripts in your mind telling you that you're not good enough, that you're an imposter, that these guys are all professionals and you're just a whatever, and that, your time has no value to them, and people just don't do it, right? That's the problem, is they just don't do the work. And what I try to do with my students is I push them to do it, because when they do, it's like it just blossoms. It's pretty amazing.
Last question before we really move on from this is, I just love all this stuff because I find it so useful as I move into the next stage in my own career. So what is one question that you love to ask? Like, if there's one question that you think the answer really gets you like good stuff, is there any particular question or questions that...
Well, I think, if I think it's a really interesting for students to ask when they're going on informational interviews, ask the lawyer, if I worked for you, if I came into your office this morning, what assignment would you give me? And that, it kind of puts the lawyer on the spot to not only think about their workload and what they're working on, but also to sort of see the student in that role as if they worked for them. So it's a really interesting, that usually gets really great responses from attorneys, because they actually have to come up with something on the spot about what they're working on. And students get a lot out of that too, because they actually learn what the day-to-day is for that attorney.
I love that. Yeah, that's so good, because it's almost the same question as, what do you do day to day, but with a little bit more context.
Right. And I always say, if you can get the potential employer, right? Everyone's a potential employer. Even though this is an informational interview, maybe somewhere down the line, they will think of you for an opening. If you can get them in an informational interview to think of you as being their employee, even if it's only to just answer that question, that's a win. Right? But I mean, that's an amazing transformation that you've made in their mind thinking of you.
I love that. There's like a whole, I won't use the word manipulation, but there's a strategy behind the language and the planting of ideas.
Right.
So what is your best actionable tip for someone who's listening today, who maybe is in law school or is an early career attorney who's trying to bring more joy and fulfillment to their own career? What's one thing they could do today to start moving towards that direction?
Yeah, I think just coming up with, if you're unhappy or you're unsure where you are, right? If you don't know what you want to do and you're just looking, or if you're unhappy in what you're currently doing, then really get imaginative. Think about, okay, what could I want to do? Go on LinkedIn and find people doing that, and then reach out to them and meet them. It's just amazing free resources that's available, and people should do it. They should do it more often. And I know we're all busy, we don't have time, and it's so stressful, but if you made time to do this, you're naturally going to expand your network.
Love it. All right. Well, now we're going to move on to the second segment of the show, which I call the Happiness Hot Seat. And these is a round of quick fire questions that I always want to get into the show, but never find time. So I've just squished them all into the middle here. You ready to go?
Ready to go.
Wonderful. Here we are. Number one, how do you deal with indecision?
So I suffer from indecision a lot. And sometimes it's about really scary things, like what law to put in this motion, or, what should I say to the judge upon getting this tentative order? And, or sometimes it's just like, what should I eat today? It can be debilitating. And what I found, the only thing that works is I just stop and I go take a walk. I have to do physical activity. I have to do something that I'm not doing in that moment. So I need to go walk around, if it's the office, the building, walk down the hall, go outside, walk the dogs, whatever it is. That usually helps shake me out of that indecision.
And so what do you do in your day-to-day life, or how do you prioritize your own happiness?
No. I have 2 kids and a husband and a job that takes up a lot of time. And then this whole side project teaching thing. So, honestly, a good day for me is when I feel like I've somehow managed to juggle it all and made myself a little bit less behind. I always feel behind, right? And that gives me anxiety, which leads to unhappiness. So happiness for me is when I can sit down in the morning and just, hit through my to-dos and prioritize. And then at the end of the day, feel like, okay, I did the things there that I said I was going to do.
I like how meta that was, because you said that the way you prioritize your happiness is by prioritizing your...
Right. It's really hard. I mean, there's just, and I know it's the same for you, because you have a lot of the same stuff going on in your life. And I know you feel me on this. It's just, it is not easy. And every day is a new challenge. And so at the end of the day, if I can feel like, okay, I was not completely overwhelmed by those challenges, that actually gives me a measure of happiness, strangely.
Yeah, no, I get it. So is there, or what particular mindset shift have you had that really changed your life?
Well, it's the one we described earlier, just the whole, so much of having worked so hard to get this career and, reach the pinnacle of success in big law, and then to feel like I had failed, and then to somehow reinvigorate that by connecting back with my law school and my lower ranked law school peeps and just people all over the country who were struggling to help, just changed my life. It really did. And that's, I can really measure it back to that day I bought the URL for Breaking the Big Law. In the last 4 years since I bought that thing, I have just been a much happier, fulfilled camper. I'm busier, but it's just a better life. It was pretty dark before that.
It's amazing how the more energizing the things you do are, the more things you can do.
Yeah, that's right.
So name a book that has really inspired you on your journey.
So that's an interesting question. I think On Writing by Stephen King is probably the most transformative book that I read. And it's interesting because, are you familiar with that book?
No, I'm not.
So it's, Stephen King, obviously very prolific horror writer, very, very good writer, but he wrote a book about how his writing process, but it's also a memoir. And it's just, he talks about his struggles and just everything he did, and, how he worked on certain books that he doesn't remember because he was so high on cocaine or whatever. And just his struggles and his process. And I remember I listened to it on Audible, and I started crying in my car. I just couldn't, I was so struck by the honesty of it. And it really just made me realize just how, for me, writing and communicating getting my ideas out there is so transformative and such a necessary thing for me, as it was for him, as he said in that book. So it articulated what I needed to do.
I love that. I haven't read it. I have heard of it, but I will add it to my list.
Yeah, you got to read it. Oh, or listen to it. He narrates the Audible.
I absolutely love Audibles narrated by the author.
He's amazing. Yeah, you got to listen to it. It's so good.
We'll definitely put it on the list. So last question of this segment is, what do you think separates happy lawyers from lawyers who struggle to find happiness in life with a law degree?
Honestly, I think it's the people that you work with will make the difference there. If you're working with, and we've all seen it, you come from big law, so if you're at a big law firm and you're just surrounded by a bunch of screaming, egotistical, awful people who just make demand after demand, and that's your working crew, and that's who you're spending most of your time with, you're just not going to be happy. I don't care. You may be working on the most high profile, most awesome case, and you're just going to want to die inside. But if you're working with good people, and big law has tons of good people and good offices, and my LA Jones Day office, that's why I stayed so long, because I was surrounded by good people who supported me and wanted the best for me. And even with my own issues, I always felt supported and loved when I was there. And now here, I'm in this environment with my colleagues who came out of the same training and the same experiences, and we respect each other so much. And it just, the work is hard and it's crazy and we're busy and we're stressed, but the support and just the respect, it just means everything. And I think that's what it is. It's the people that you work with, and your contribution and their contribution back, and it's the give and take.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, one of the things I like to do is I like to give my listeners an opportunity to ask questions. So people send me in questions to have on the show. And so I have a couple here for you today that I'm going to kind of summarize, because I got a lot of the same questions. And I think basically what it boils down to is people who are trying to transition into a new industry in the law. Do you have any different advice, or is there something they should be doing different if they're trying to build a new network within a new space?
Honestly, it's the same advice I give to my new lawyers and the students. Think about it. Like if you want to go from being a plaintiff side employment litigator and become an entertainment transactional lawyer, you want to completely shift and go to this other thing, you have to do the informational interviews. You got to meet the people. You got to find out. And even if you're, a 10, 20-year lawyer and you feel like, oh, no one will want to meet with you, of course they will. It's how you frame it and how you frame yourself and how you frame your journey and why you want to do this, right? And it'll take some starts and stops, but that's definitely the way to do it. And you can do it through networking events and cocktail receptions. But I think just trying to set these meetings is just an extra thing that people don't do that they should do outside of just traditional networking.
And I think one of the things I heard in a lot of the questions, and I may be projecting, but I think that there's this concern that people have about whether it's going to take long. Like when you start over,
right?
Is it going to take as long to get as far as you were in your prior career, and they're looking for a secret sauce to kind of jumpstart this new career. And I don't know necessarily that it's always going to be true, but I think in most cases, the experience that you have from having done it once will make it go faster.
Right. I believe that. I definitely, I think that. And I think your transferable skills and your, once you've been doing this for a while, you get quicker on picking up the lingo and conversing and just kind of plugging in with people. And plus you have confidence. You have confidence that you've built up over this career that you've worked and sweated for. And that's going to shine through and show, and people will react to that. And then you bring with it this added passion for this new thing that you're interested in, and it makes you actually a winning package. So I do think if you do it right and strategically, it can actually go quicker.
Awesome. Last thing, where can people pick up? We haven't said the name of the book, which is my bad.
My bad too.
And so, go ahead, give us your spiel. Tell us all about the book, where people can pick it up. It's now available. So
yes. The name of the book is The Law Career Playbook, and it is now available on Amazon and also on my website, which is lawcareerplaybook.com. So you can buy it either place.
Awesome. Yep. I'll have links to all of that at thehappylawyerproject.com. So you guys can check it out there if you're, on your commute or out for a run. So thank you so much, Rachel, for being a part of the project and sharing your story here with us today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. So happy to do it.
Thanks so much for listening. And if you got value out of this episode and you think there's someone else who might enjoy it, I'd love for you guys to share. And if you have any questions for me, please head over to the website at thehappylawyerproject.com and you can leave me a voicemail right on the website. When you get there, you'll see a little tab on the right hand of the screen and you can click on it and leave a voicemail there. I absolutely love hearing from you guys. Last but not least, if you enjoy this podcast and you like the content that I'm bringing to you guys and you haven't done so already, I would really encourage you guys to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and review. That's all for this week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening.